I'm 25 years old. The night I killed someone wasn't the first time I drove drunk. I have a life sentence, and there's something I need to tell you before I tell you how I got here, something that took me months to admit to myself. But first, I need you to understand who I was before. 3 years ago, I was a sophomore engineering student. I lived with my parents because the university was close by and there was no reason to move out. My mom packed me lunch on Tuesdays and Thursdays. My dad let me borrow the car on weekends without asking too many questions. I had a younger sister, 5 years younger than me, who sent me memes on WhatsApp and asked me for help with her math homework. It was a completely ordinary life, and at the time, ordinary seemed like enough. The problem with ordinary lives is that they also have ordinary rituals. Mine was going out on Fridays. It wasn't something I carefully planned. It was simply what we did. My friends and I would get together at someone's house, then at a bar, then wherever. We drank, not dramatically, not in a way that seemed worrisome. We drank like most people do in their 20s because it was Friday, because the week was over, because everyone was doing it. And then the first time came. I was 18, I'd had a drink at a party, not too much, or so I thought. My friends were still partying. I decided to leave. I got in my car, drove, and got home without a hitch. Nothing happened. That was all it took. A single night without consequences to build a conviction that lasted for years. If you only knew how many dangerous decisions are based on that same foundation, what no one explained to me then, and what I never stopped to think about, is that alcohol doesn't make you feel out of control. It makes you feel exactly the same as always, only with less ability to gauge the difference. You don't feel like you're failing. You feel like you're fine. And that feeling of being okay is precisely the problem, because it isn't real, but it feels completely real. For 2 years, I drove like that. Not every week, not in a way that I could identify a pattern. The variable was never how much I drunk. The variable was whether I felt okay, and I almost always felt okay until the night I felt almost nothing. It was about 8 months before the accident. A side street night, me driving with a friend in the passenger seat. Suddenly a pole appeared too close. I braked. I narrowly avoided it. We both laughed. My friend said, "When that was close," I nodded, started again, and we drove on. That was it. There was no serious conversation, no moment of reflection. There was a scare, a comfortable laugh, and the night went on as if nothing had interrupted anything, because scares, when they have no visible consequences, are filed away as anecdotes, not as warnings. That night I got home, I went to bed, and the next day I didn't think about the pole. I think about it all the time now. The night of the accident wasn't any different from other nights. That's what I find hardest to accept when I'm here alone with the silence. It wasn't a night when everything went wrong from the start. There weren't any obvious signs that I consciously ignored. It was a normal night within what had become normal for me. I left around 9. We met at a friend's apartment. Beer first, then something stronger, the kind of mix that doesn't seem important when you're 20 because nothing important has happened to you yet. At some point, someone suggested switching places. My friends were in another car. I went in mine. Before leaving the parking lot, I paused for a moment, and this is what I need you to hear clearly. I wondered if I should drive. That thought existed. I'm not making it up to seem more aware than I was. I asked myself that question, and I answered yes, that I was fine. Not because I had any evidence that I was fine, but because I had no clear evidence that anything was wrong. And at that moment, the lack of evidence was enough. The drive was short, less than 10 minutes. A route I knew by heart. I don't remember the impact. I remember turning on the music. I remember a green light. I remember a sound I'd never heard before, and that I can't describe exactly, but that I know I'll never forget. After that, I remember standing outside the car, not knowing how I got there. There was a man in the street. I'm not going to describe what I saw, not because I want to protect you, but because what matters isn't that image. What matters is what I learned afterward. What changed me wasn't the accident, it was what they told me after it was all over. The man who died was 42 years old. He had 3 children. The youngest was 4. That night, he'd gone out to run an errand, something small, the kind of thing you do without thinking twice. He planned to be back in 20 minutes. His wife waited for him all night, not knowing what had happened. When they told me that, something shifted inside me. Because until that moment, even though I knew I had caused a death, I processed it as my story, my mistake, my ruined life, and suddenly I understood that this was a luxury I didn't deserve. The story that mattered wasn't mine. There's a child who was 4 years old that night and who will grow up without his father. That's not an abstract fact. He's a real person who will have real moments he should have had with his father, and in which there will be an absence. That absence has a name, and that name is a decision I made in a parking lot in less than 30 seconds. 30 seconds, 2 years of accumulated habit, an entire life erased. The legal process was long. In the end, I was sentenced to life imprisonment. What I remember from the moment I heard that was fear or despair. It was silence, an inner silence, as if something had finally found the place where it always belonged. My parents were in the courtroom. My mother didn't cry during the sentencing. That was what affected me most that day. I knew her well enough to understand what that silence meant. It wasn't coldness, it was the exhaustion of someone who no longer has tears left for that magnitude of pain. My sister was 16. We stopped speaking for almost a year, not because she hated me, but because neither of us knew what to say to each other when what had happened couldn't be contained in any normal conversation. I've been here for 3 years, and I've come to a conclusion that isn't dramatic or groundbreaking, but which seems to me the most honest one I can offer. What happened that night wasn't an accident in the sense that we use that word when we want to say that something was inevitable. It was the predictable result of behavior I'd repeated enough times for the odds to eventually turn against me. It wasn't a question of if, it was a question of when. Alcohol isn't some external monster that controlled me. Alcohol did exactly what it always does. It reduced my ability to assess risks without me even noticing. And instead of building a fixed rule for those situations, I built an assessment system that relied on my own judgment in the moment, the very judgment that was compromised. That's what doesn't work when someone says, I know when I'm okay to drive. They don't know, not because they're bad people or irresponsible, but because the instrument they're using to measure it is exactly the instrument that's failing. I used to say it too. I said it with complete conviction. I think about all the nights I got home safely, all the short trips that ended well, and I wonder how many people are doing the exact same thing right now. Getting home safely, convincing yourself that the risk doesn't exist because it hasn't had consequences yet. Patterns are invisible until they produce a result. And by the time the result appears, it no longer matters how many times it worked before. How many times have you come home safe and sound and interpreted it as confirmation that you can keep doing it? I asked myself that same question. Only 3 years too late. I wasn't a bad person. I'm not saying this to defend myself. I'm saying it because I think that's the most uncomfortable part of this story for most people. Like, I wasn't someone who looked down on others or who lacked a conscience. I was an ordinary person with an ordinary life who normalized a small decision until that decision stopped being small. The problem doesn't exist only in clearly negligent or clearly irresponsible people. It exists in completely normal people who, at some point, rely on unreliable judgment. That makes it harder to see and easier to ignore. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if on one of those nights, someone hadn't asked me, "Are you okay to drive?" but rather, "What if you make a mistake?" If someone had forced me to imagine not the scenario where I arrived safely, but the scenario where I didn't, I don't know if anything would have changed, but it seems to me the only question worth asking. There are things I won't be able to do. I won't be there when my sister graduates. I won't be there if my parents need help. I won't have any of the things I assumed I would have because I assumed them without having built them yet. But there is something I do know. I can do this. Tell the truth about how I got here. Not the simplified version where it all boils down to one bad night. The full version, which involved repeated decisions, ignored signs, and a trust in my own judgment that was never justified. This didn't start the night of the accident. It started the first night I made it home safely and decided that meant I can keep doing it. The question that remains for me, and I think for anyone who's been here, isn't whether an alcohol is dangerous. We already know that. The question is this: at what point does a decision stop being a mistake and become a choice? And does the answer change depending on whether someone got hurt or not? Because if the only difference between me and someone who made it home safely, like that same night, is that I had bad luck, then we're measuring responsibility by the wrong metric. And that should make more people uncomfortable than they admit.